Not even going to process. Oh, okay.
Probably not rapid.
Oh, no, okay. So he was planning to come. Was actually the session, the chair thing was quite good. I want it.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
Time to start now.
You are in a PRECIS working group, and if you got lost, I find this to be very surprising, but you never know.
This is PRECIS working group meeting. This is obviously under the traditional note well. This is the proposed agenda. So status of the last calls that we have done, and there was a request for mapping, and I haven't heard any slides or anything about mapping. Okay. And if there's any discussion about the Lucid buff that just happened. Any suggested changes to the agenda? Nope. Okay. So here's the status of our current documents. Sorry?
It's good enough. But yeah, the projector's funny.
And actually it looks better this one without sunlight, eliminating most of the colors.
But we could shrink it.
I'm not going to play the version. No.
So, well, I can tell you summary. We published one document, the problem statement, like a couple of years ago. Framework is in RFC editor's queue, and we have two documents in publication requested, and Barry will.
Well, and shift the screen just a little to the right, so that you can see.
It says
One.
Barry Leva on the two.
Okay.
Oh, we have a good smart person.
Somebody who knows how to do this.
Okay. Well, anyway.
A bit further back, or closer.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
So framework is done. We have Peter, who has prepared a few slides on the last two documents. I think what we have Matt Miller that has submitted is Shepherd review, but for the nickname, the Shepherd hasn't sent his write-up, so that's one missing, I guess, from the process point of view.
So.
This is Barry. Your AD has a question. Is there anything related to Lucid or other things of that nature that makes you want me to hold up on these, or you just want me to charge ahead and process them next week?
I think we have discussed that in length in the about the framework, and the idea was essentially we add some text that says,
Right.
be careful, and
And the same is true with these two documents. Okay,
right.
that's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, Joe, please get me a. Joe is not around. Anyway, we'll deal with it.
So this is what Peter prepared, Peter Saint-André, and since he's not here, and that's my fault, I didn't prepare channeling audio from him that I should have, but so I'll do it with the slides. So framework done, approved for publication. The registry is done. The code points table are done, and Peter is reviewing the table to make sure that all the code points are okay, and then we'll send this okay. Then this will trigger the RFC editor to publish. So we may get it in a few days. Sassel Prep BIS, I think you're a co-author of this one. right? So
Why don't we talk about it?
Yeah, so basically, relatively, this has changed since Honolulu. The username profile got split into two for case insensitive, case insensitive. And then basically the document was brought in sync with the framework changes and updates. But for the most part, well, it is done. We believe it's ready for working group for IETF last call. I was just talking to Barry. I think we will ask for a couple of apps directorate reviewers for this. That's probably one way of getting, more reviewers.
Nickname, somewhat similar, updated, and from the outer address working group last call feedback and ready to go for IETF last call. XMPP BIS has been XMPP 6122 BIS, who is referring to these, has been working group last call in the in the XMPP working group, and then simultaneously in PRECIS, and we think it's going ready for IETF last call. However, this is done on the XMPP side, so it's more for your information, I guess. So I guess I have a question, unless there's some comments or question. I think my generic question is the AD okay, and is there anything missing for you, apart from, I think, the Shepherd write-up and... Okay, mapping. Someone requested, I don't have your slides. Do you have slides or just a talk?
Sorry, I don't have a slide.
Okay.
In this time, I'd like to make sure the mapping document next step. According to IETF, according to the discussion in IETF 90s, the mapping document will move to working group last call after framework document IETF last call is done. But I'm very sorry. I had not finished to revise the mapping document, and so the current status of the mapping document is expired. So I'm revising the mapping document to fit the latest framework document.
Yeah, we need to synchronize all those together.
I'm going to submit the document until early April. So I'd like to ask chairs whether the working group schedule allows the submission. So I'm going to submit the mapping document as soon as possible, and I'd like to hear your comment to proceed.
Was the mapping document working group document yet? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it has been expired. That's why I'm not seeing it. Okay, so okay, cool. So we're waiting for having you a new version.
Yeah.
Synchronized with PRECIS framework.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Peter St. Andre, regarding SASL Prep BIS, we received quite a bit of feedback a long time ago from people like Nico Williams, and perhaps we could ask them for a sanity check at this time.
Andrew Sullivan. On the mapping document, this is maybe anticipating a little bit too much the next agenda item, but we just heard in the Lucid BOF a suggestion that one of the directions that we could end up going if we don't have a lot of if we don't have success with a property is essentially a significant mapping document, right? A significant bit of advice. Now, I'm not sure whether it's the same mapping, and that is what's not clear to me. So I mean, I don't actually have an opinion on which way to go, but it seems to me that one of the things you could ask yourself is whether it would be better to see how that proceeds in order to proceed with the mapping document, or to publish this and then do another one later.
Well, I guess my personal point is that mapping, as with iDNA, mapping is pretty important for most of the customers of PRECIS. So, and then right now we have a rough idea of maybe something that we may work with Unicode. So it looks like, to me, more appropriate to have a full package of PRECIS that people could do, and then Revit, because I don't know.
So this is Pete Resnick. I think the more important point is, I'm guessing it's very likely that the mapping kind of stuff we would do to deal with the Lucid issues, even if we get to that point, are going to be very different from the kind of mapping that's being described as sort of a more general, here's the kinds of things you could do mapping-wise. They're dealing with very different looking problem spaces, I think. They will, if we go down that path in Lucid, I think they will end up converging, but I think Mark's right. There's a utility enough of the current mapping document that we should probably go ship it and do a rev if they converge.
And in the Jabbers, someone said, we could probably do some similar to what PRECIS framework says, which is a bit of heads up of warning.
Right. So I'm again. This is Andrew. I'm fine with all of that. I'm not. I actually just don't have an opinion. But I'm conscious of what I think it was Chris said in the
multiple revisions.
Multiple versions is maybe a problem. So just a thing to consider.
Okay. Well, we're a good segue to the other. So this the next item on. Yes.
There is a relay from John Clancy. So Mike, it seems to me that if we are going to publish mapping now, it better contain very strong and lucid warnings. Mm-hmm. And another channel is Mike. I think that view is consistent with that, with what Pete is saying.
So I think we will review when the new version comes out of the document and see, altogether if we need to do something more or less, depending. Segue to the placeholder of do we need in PRECIS to think about Lucid or what happens in a couple of the last 2 hours. We know what would happen, but maybe one question to the ED is PRECIS the right home to start this pre-Lucid work or not, or doesn't matter, or?
Sorry, before that, can I ask an ignorant question for somebody who had a conflict? Is there one sentence or one paragraph summary of Lucid? Well, I think your laugh is indicative, but which I sort of suspected. But Okay, well,
The ones.
Yeah, I'm going to guess the summary, and so Andrew went through the issues and then proposed 5 possible directions we could take to deal with them. The issue, of course, is how to deal with new characters that changes in the character set from Unicode that break the situation that we expect. And we looked at the 5 directions and added a 6th, and then took a hum. And as I remember it, the direction that we decided was best was to try to work with the Unicode people to come up with a new property on characters, or a new set of properties on characters that we could synthesize a derived property from that would help us, and or create an NFI, a normalization format for IETF that, again, well, for identifiers, whatever, that would come up, that would have to be something we'd have to work out with Unicode as well. And that the backup of that is to say, well, we have to put warnings about where you might have problems. And I don't think we decided, and the similar one of warnings was, what did we call it, Andrew?
Bundling and blocking.
Bundling and blocking,
registration,
right. Bundling and blocking certain characters, bundling certain characters, that sort of thing.
Registration-ready protocols.
Where we would do this work was left up in the air, and that's what these guys up front are asking us now.
This is Andrew. I think the only thing that I would add to that is it wasn't clear, at least to me, but that could just be that my brain is, I think it shriveled a couple hours ago, that we have an understanding of what kind of property exactly it would be. So there is a potentially very serious problem that we know we've got something that we want to describe, but we don't know what that description is. And we could wander around in the dark for a very long time. The one thing that did leave me feeling a little sad at the end of that discussion was that people seemed to agree that there was a property, or maybe several, that we needed to describe. And then I thought about, well, look at the tremendous energy and output that happened in this working group, how we managed to get everything going. And that worries me a little bit, because if we don't get the engagement from the people who are going to consume this in order to sort of figure out and hammer out exactly how we're going to work on that, I don't think we'll get the property. I think we'll end up with just a lot of speculation, and then we won't, because sorry to ramble here, I haven't formulated this very well. My interactions with people who are active in Unicode suggest to me that there are people who are sympathetic to the idea that we need, there are people who are not sympathetic, but then there are people who are sympathetic to the idea that maybe we need a property or two here, but they want us to describe something that is clear, distinct, distinguishable, and sort of algorithmic. And that means that we've got to do quite a lot of work. Some of this may have security implications, and I don't know if we're getting the pollination across the area that maybe we need for that. So that's really the only thing that I would raise.
This is Pete again. I'm much more bushy-tailed than Andrew is, so let me see if I can lay out why quickly. First of all, at the end of the session, I heard a lot of people say, well, the work that we would invest, at least the upfront work we would invest in trying to work with the Unicode Consortium and get them what that property means, is pretty much equivalent to the work we would invest to try and come up with a set of warnings or bundling rules and everything else that goes with the other choice. So it's not wasted work in either event. And some of it is, I agree hard, but that work's going to have to be done one way or the other. The other bit that I'm a little more sanguine than Andrew about is with regard to the Unicode Consortium, simply because I think the work that we have to do here is not stuff that we, sorry guys, one meeting please, is not stuff that we can possibly do on our own, right? Figuring out what that property is and what is even plausible to do is something that is going to be an interactive process with Unicode, that we're going to have to say, is this a distinguishable thing that you could come up with? And part of figuring out what it is that we're missing is going to be part of that conversation. I think that conversation is worth having one way or the other. And I'm going to lose the thread here because my brain's about as mushy as Andrew's. The other thing that he said was we're going to have to get the people who are wanting to use the profiles again involved in this conversation. I think that's actually only marginally true, if it's true at all. I think we went through the process and decided that the particular compromise we made, okay, these are characters that are distinguishable within script and therefore, and have distinguishable properties and therefore are okay to use as identifiers. So we made a category error. We didn't get what we thought we wanted, but I don't think we have to go through the process of asking all those implementers again what they want. I think we have to figure out with the Unicode Consortium whether we can actually instantiate what we thought we wanted with properties that they could provide. So I'm not clear that we actually have to go back and redo all the work that we did here. I don't even think we have to do very much of it.
I'll push back on the penultimate thing that you said. So getting anybody else involved in this, getting the consumers of this stuff involved is a non-starter. I agree with that. No one except a handful of people want to have anything to do with this kind of sausage, even if they want to eat the sausage. But we have here a specific instance of something that breaks our assumptions and makes us want to do this. The ultimate properties we want is this is a character that's safe to use in identifiers, but that's too generic. The trouble is that the next time Unicode changes something, they may change a different aspect of things that causes the character to be unsafe to combine with other characters in identifiers. And so this may be an iterative process, either getting different properties or getting the same property applied differently in the future when Unicode 7.2 or 8.0 or whatever comes out. And that's the part that I worry about.
I'm really bad in this planning of this meeting, but I forgot to ask a secretary or any scribe. So it would, and given that we're starting a discussion, we would like to get it, somewhat in some place. Any volunteer for scribing? At least starting from now. Please.
Oh. Listen to the MP3 later. And
Thanks.
Sure.
Yes.
Then you can write down what I say.
Right, and I can probably remember how to write down what I say. Jim Schott. So this is a question for, I guess, Barry or Andrew. What percentage of what this property needs to be do we currently think we actually understand and know how to write down?
No. That's part of the work that has to be done.
Ladar, I was going to say that as a consumer of this information, as a consumer of these rules, maybe I can express Ladar. Sorry. As a consumer of these rules, I can express at least the particular use case that I am looking at, and it may actually turn into a way of describing this property, this mythical property that we're talking about. which is the idea that when I go out and I fetch a public key for a particular email address, and I get back a public key that has a slightly different identifier on it than what the user input, how do I compare those two strings to differentiate a situation where it's a substitution attack versus just a different way of expressing the same piece of information? And the example that came up in between sessions was the two different ways of typing in the city Zurich, where one uses a normal U and the other one has a U with two dots over it. And presumably a human would assume that both of those are equivalent, but a computer would not. So if a user types in Zurich with or without the dots over the U, presumably it should match something. Now, when we're talking about a property, maybe that is a good way of describing it, precisely because if we compare this to how when we do a search, and again, I'm an American, all I speak is English, so I'm going to use examples from English. You have the option of searching for a word where you preserve the case or you don't preserve the case. And I'm starting to think that that's the type of property that we need for these identifiers, where you can conduct a search and you look for equivalent representations of the same character, but don't necessarily match alternate characters that look similar but are actually different. And that is a situation where the U with the dots over it versus the U are actually different. And if you have this property that is expressed programmatically, then you can conduct the search first for the exact normalized string that was provided, and if you get a match, return it. If you don't get a match, you can also write the protocol spec such that the server would presumably conduct a second search where this property is disabled or turned on, or however you want to express it, would locate the possibility of an equivalent match and be able to suggest, hey, did you really mean Zurich with the two dots over the U? And then the MUA can say, is this what you really meant? User can click OK, and it can update the email address field or not. And to me, that almost seems like an expression of uppercase versus lowercase, but I'm looking at it very naively. And the more we talk about it, the more it sounds like we almost need to involve the folks at the UTC, precisely because they're the ones that have stockpiled all of the people who are intelligent about these issues. With how many hundreds of different languages that are represented by Unicode, I don't think the IETF has people who speak all of those different languages and understand the various properties of all those different scripts. But that's basically where I came to. I guess the only other thing I'd close out my long-winded ramble with is by saying that when I'm developing a system, I need to be cognizant of a situation that me and Pete talked about, where some systems may want to allow a situation where you have two users, one that spells Zurich with the regular U and one with the dots over it. And some systems may want to make those mutually exclusive, where you can have one but not the other. You can do either one, but you can't have both because of the confusion factor, and that's where the security aspect gets into it. And I was of the opinion that you wouldn't want to have both of those accounts on the same system just because a user could type in one variation of that name and end up sending a sensitive message to a completely different account, which is not the desired outcome from a security perspective. Pete was arguing that there are a lot of people who would want those to be two distinct accounts and would get upset if they couldn't make that distinction. So it's just something to be cognizant of in how we express this problem, needs to be aware of that?
Andrew Sullivan, and I will channel myself first and then John. When I was in high school, I was in a band, and we had, among other things, a song called I Hate Motley Crue, the lyrics of which were, I hate Motley Crue, I hate the dots above the U. And I didn't know that, lo, these many years later, it was going to be truer than I... Holy. Anyway, so to my response to Jim's question, do we understand this, is essentially giraffe handlebar bicycle. No, we don't know. John had something a little bit more sane, which is essentially depends on what you mean by we and understand. So I think that that's fundamentally what the work of that we would need to do under Lucid is. That's not why I got up here, though. I got up here to respond to Barry's remark, which was if Unicode changes this again, stuff could shift on us again. I think we want to be very careful here. Unicode didn't actually change anything. They had a system that just didn't work the way we thought it did. And what they did is they added a code point under a set of conventions and principles that we did not fully grasp. Now, there is reason to suppose that no English speaker of sufficient technical background could have read the definitions in the Unicode standard prior to 7.0 and understand that, but it appears now in retrospect that there was a fairly consistent set of principles going on there, and maybe it was just a bug in the way it was written down. Finally, to channel something else that John was saying, which is on a different topic, the Zurich case doesn't involve Lucid issue and is very fundamental to what PRECIS is supposed to be doing. So it's really quite a different case. In particular, normalization won't help with that either, but it turns into a very tricky language-sensitive problem, and the language-sensitive problem is something that I think we're not doing here, or not doing in the Lucid thing.
Clarify in what Andrew just said. I did not, this is Barry. I did not mean that Unicode had changed something or that it was their fault. But what I meant to say is that in the future there might be some other aspect of how they make decisions that we were equally unaware of now that would trip us up.
This is Pete, and I think I'm going to continue to disagree with Barry on this one. The whole idea of actually having a communication with the Unicode Consortium and getting them to come up with a property that we mutually understand to be the thing we're working on, it's certainly possible that we screw it up again and we don't understand what they mean, and that we end up with a new set of characters that do something very different, but we've really lowered the odds if this communication goes on mutually. And Barry says, yep. And just to follow up on what John said to Ladar, which I think is an important point, the what I would call compatibility matching, the sort of search stuff, really is sort of independent of what PRECIS is doing and what the Lucid problem is about. It's certainly something that needs to be dealt with, and we can have a long discussion about what kinds of things we do for those sort of fuzzy matching rules, which is a whole big complicated problem, and some of them you'll want to solve in your implementation, and some of them you really won't. But PRECIS, the kind of property that we're talking about is strictly if you want to use these things purely as identifiers without fuzzy matching, that you want all of the false positives to go away. And once we get into the fuzzy matching stuff, we've got a whole different problem. So we do want to separate that out. We're working on the property for identifiers that are not going to be used in fuzzy matching.
Stuart Cheshire, a quick comment, things we should remember, and I think some of the people in the room know this, but probably not everybody. We need to be very careful not to apply our own intuition to languages we don't understand. And Ladar was saying something that we all do. We assume that the O with or without the little dots on top ought to be the same letter, because to us, as English speakers, And like you, I'm only fluent in English. I can read and write passable French and German and Hindi and Gujarati, but I don't know any right to left scripts, and I don't know Japanese or Chinese. So I've got limited personal experience. And to me, the little dots on the letter are just like crumbs on the page. A little bit of dirt, I brush them away because they don't matter. But to other people, they're really important. And we need to not make the mistakes. If people in another culture were having this discussion about English, and I'll just use this as an analogy, they might say that letter L and the L with a line through it, well, they're kind of the same thing. But the L with a line through it is a T. And to us, to map those as the same identifier would be crazy. And Polish has an L with a line in it, except that L is slanted and it's pronounced like a W. And that's not a T or an L. So our intuition that it's obvious that uppercase A and lowercase a are the same thing is a very dangerous intuition to carry on to other scripts.
I was just going to say, I think he made an important point, and it made me realize that what this problem really isn't understanding the specific languages, because we have matching rules that are specific to a script already. The problem is that we're building systems that cut across language and locale boundaries, where we've got US users talking to people in Europe that speak a completely different language, and like you pointed out, have very different ideas about what should match and what shouldn't. And that's where the problem lies, because a US user may not understand the distinction between two characters that a European user would. And how do we come up with rules that we can apply to be as safe as possible, so that at least when we get it wrong, we can point to the standard and say, well, that's what they said we should do.
So Lucid is done, right? Okay. I'm not sure there's a clear conclusion, but it was a placeholder in case we had a clear, work item for PRECIS. Last item I would like to talk to is something that has been discussed a bit during the working group lunch today. Was so one of the deliverables of this working group. So these are below here. Let me see if I can improve the. Okay, so we've done that. We've done some of those. Then there was an idea of guidelines for people to, help doing profiles or not doing profiles and stuff, and that document hasn't been started. So are we going to do it, or close the working group, or wait until further profiles come in or something? So there were some support in the working group chair lunch to get the guidelines for people, but that would require some people to write the document. So if we don't have anybody to write a document, so we're gonna bail.
Yeah. Do you honestly think, this is Barry, do you honestly think that there's enough energy here to do something like that? Right.
So this is a question of the floor.
That's a possibility, though, what Alexei just said, not unless people come in and help. So if you can scare up enough people to come in and reactivate things, then I'm happy to let the working group go in that direction. On the profiles, I think what's more likely, that you're probably not going to get profiles coming in tomorrow, right? They're probably going to come in a while later if they do. So I'd be more happy to charter up a new working group to do the profiles that come in later. But on the advice document, whatever, Yeah, if you can scare up enough people to get some energy, go for it. Otherwise, I don't see doing it in the current working group will work.
Okay, so it's kind of the last call for people. If you want to author such document, please start and contact, but we need an editor at least, right? So if you don't raise your hand soon, then we may have no more working group. We may shut down the working group, right? Any other comment before we close? Okay, thank you very much.
Wait, Peter has a...
Peter St. Andre. The best way to work on the advice document might be to provide advice through expert reviews of profiles and learn what the topics are that would need to be covered. So I guess that's by way of saying that we should wait on doing that too until we have more experience with the existing profiles and the new ones that are requested.
Well, I know some people that are getting free that would be very good for doing stuff, but I'd like that.
Maybe I'd like to review the document. Maybe we Japanese can, as a Asian, one of the Asian people, we can provide some good feedback for that. But for a whole structure, we are not good at writing the long document of English. So if people can move forward to it, we can help. Certainly help it, I think.
All right, we have 10 minutes back in our lives.
Thank you.
Lock the door.
Before you leave, please sign a blue sheet.
I'm sorry.
I have done this before. Chair is doing what we 50 lashes. Yeah, just for the record.
Have that workshop around like the last meeting in PLD call.
It could be possible week before or week after the IETF process, for example. Prague is quite a nice place, and it is possible to combine two events. One of the things to understand is the way off from it. Quite a good and so visual events could be some project. But to have it is not, mostly it's not quite a like what was collected, like training on internet security,